Hey guys, Willie and Murfitt here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. In today's episode, I'm going to be working on my 1979 Mini Clubman saloon and hopefully going to get it back up and running, ready for the show season. So those of you who have seen this channel previously would hopefully have followed this build on my 1979 Clubman saloon called Rusty. Now originally the build was to get the car ready for IMM, which I successfully achieved. Yes! And since then I've done a few shows, and over the end of the show season last year it developed a slight misfire. I'm gonna sneeze. Better. Right, so yeah, over the course of the season it developed a bit of a misfire. It was slightly intermittent. On the way home from Minis in the Mountain it was what I like to call catastrophic. I took the rotor arm and the cap off, and the cap was actually seized, so I got a new electronic ignition rotor arm and matching cap from Power Spark, because that's the distributor that I've got, and it seemed to work okay. I rechecked the timing, I rechecked the valve clearance, and everything was running fine for a week or so. And then I developed another misfire. I'm not sure if it's the same cause or symptom, but yeah, it's not good. So I'm hopefully going to try and make this car as bomb-proof as possible by replacing a few bits and pieces this year. Last year was to get the car up and running on the road. This year I'm all about reliability. So the first job I'm going to do is a replacement head gasket. This time I'm not going to use the copper gasket. I will be using this composite gasket. Now this gasket kit itself is just a composite head gasket from MiniMine. It was I think £10, and yeah, I'm really keen to try this out. I fitted a composite head gasket to Alex Toon's 1275 Mini Sprite. That was a BK450 specifically for the 1275. And that worked fantastic, so I'm really keen to see what this is like for the car. If this works well, then I've got another one over there for another job that I did last year, which unfortunately the head gasket's gone on that also. Next up I've got a few gaskets. I've got a thermostat gasket, I've got a water pump gasket, I've got an exhaust manifold gasket, and I've got the bolt kits for the thermostat and the water pump, because although they're okay, they're actually pretty heavily corroded, and it's not great considering the engine looks all nice and fresh, the rocker cover looks all nice and fresh, and yeah, it just kind of lets the whole look of the engine bay down. So I'm going to change them out, and hopefully this is going to resolve that issue. So let's get into it. So one of the first things I'm going to do is remove anything that's going to get in the way to get this cylinder head off. So HT leads out the way. I've conveniently marked them up with zip ties. They've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. That is respective of 1, 2, 3 and 4. I'm going to remove the radiator completely out, which means having to drain the radiator and the cooling system. That way I can get access to the water pump to replace the gasket on this. It's not leaking, but I'm going to replace the bolts, and when I remove the bolts the gasket's obviously going to come out. I'm going to remove this pipe. I'm going to keep the valve connector on, and another job I'm going to do is I'm going to replace some bits on the carburetor to make it look a little bit more presentable. So the carb's going to come off, the inlet manifold's going to come off, and the top hose, this heater hose here, the radiator, as I say, is going to come out, and undo the bolts for the exhaust manifold. I'm hopefully also then going to do release the upper engine steady, rock the engine forward, lift the cylinder head off. So, start with the carburetor. Now typically for a head gasket fault you would do a compression test on this. Now the reason I'm not doing one is because although I don't know this isn't the issue, I'm also not that really interested, because the head gasket's going to get replaced anyway. So if the fault is fixed, then in theory it wouldn't misfire going forward. pretty good in here, apart from this one cylinder where there is a leak of, well, there seems to be a contaminant of like milky oil or milky residue as I'm moving the piston up and down. So that, to me, suspects that somewhere along the line there has been a head gasket failure. I just don't know where. That's the issue. Let's get this old gasket off. There doesn't seem to be any breaks in the gasket, but you can see that in between number 2 and number 3 there is like a light brown sludge, which possibly could have been getting into the cylinders. So I'm glad I'm doing this. It's a shame I'm doing this, but I'm glad I am doing it. So I need to drain the oil out because there is going to be water into the oil, and yeah, let's get this car rebuilt. So let's take a closer look at these bores then. Number 4 looks to be okay. Let's see if we can turn this. So yeah, the piston bore lining seems to be alright. Number 1, you can see that milky residue I was talking about on the top, but the actual lining of the bore seems absolutely fine. 2 and 3 seem absolutely spot on as well. So I'm really happy that the block is in good nick. I'd be upset if the block was damaged and needing to be repaired. Cylinder head wise, it's a similar story. What you can see is that it's been running pretty rich. Obviously they're all blacked up, carboned up chambers, which isn't too bad, but it does show that it's been running particularly rich because that's just unburnt soot effectively. So once it's all back together, I need to get this rolling roaded. I'm going to book it in with a local rolling road garage. It's not the cheapest, but he is the only guy locally to North Wales that does A-series and actual tuning of carburetors on the rollers. He'll change needles about and whatnot as well. So I want to get this car running right, so I'm better off to do it that way. Okay, so as I've been cleaning the cylinder head up, I've just noticed at the tip of my finger, zoom into it, towards the front of the engine there's this brown lump. Now it's got a lot of like hard bits in, so I'm not quite sure what that is. There's no bore there for oil or water, but it feels like grit. So whether it's at the back here I had an O-ring and it's disintegrated, I don't know, but that's a bit strange. And it's just in a little puddle. So yeah, not overly keen on that. So it's got unwritten on it top, and there's a smoother metal side on the bottom. So let's get this lined up. Okay, so I'm not going to be doing any checking because the head was built recently. The car didn't overheat. I just think it's a failure of the copper gasket. It was a cheap one I picked up when a company were getting rid of all their stock, so I'm not overly concerned about that. So I'm just going to go clean the cylinder head up quickly. ready to fit back onto the block. Okay, so that is going to be the end of episode 1 of the head gasket replacement on my Mini. I have filmed all of this in one go, but I'm kind of running the risk of it being too long of a video, which I don't want. So this is going to be the end of part 1. I'm going to get editing part 2. Hopefully we can see some improvement and get the stuff back together in part 2. So thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this content so far, please hit that thumbs up button, comment down below, and if you can, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss on any future content. I will see you guys in part 2. Take it easy.